Close your eyes for a moment and imagine stepping off a plane, driving down a winding road, and arriving somewhere that feels like time simply forgot to move forward. The gas lamps still flicker at dusk. The town square still buzzes with farmers' markets and colonial reenactors. The storefronts haven't changed their signage in a century, and somewhere nearby, a blacksmith is still hammering iron the old-fashioned way. That place isn't a movie set. It's not a theme park. It's real, and it's right here in America. Welcome to our exploration of 10 historic towns across the United States that don't just preserve their past, they live it, breathe it, and invite you to step inside it. Whether you're a history buff, a curious traveler, or someone desperate to escape the noise of the modern world, these towns offer something genuinely rare, an authentic glimpse into who we were as a nation, and who, in many ways, we still are. So buckle up. We're going back in time, and we're not coming back empty-handed. Town number 1, Williamsburg, Virginia. Our journey begins in Williamsburg, Virginia, a name that's virtually synonymous with American colonial history. And for good reason. Founded in 1632, Williamsburg served as the capital of the Virginia colony for nearly a century. It was here that some of the earliest seeds of American independence were planted in taverns, courthouses, and drawing rooms where names like Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington regularly walked the streets. Today, Colonial Williamsburg, the living history museum that covers 301 acres of the original town, is one of the largest and most ambitious historical preservation efforts on the planet. It's not a dusty museum with roped-off exhibits. It's a living, breathing recreation of 18th-century colonial life, where over 600 trained interpreters play the roles of blacksmiths, milliners, apothecaries, and colonial-era politicians in full-period costume, every single day. Walk down Duke of Gloucester Street, and you might find yourself pulled into a heated colonial debate about taxation. Step into the governor's palace, and you're transported to a world of Georgian architecture and candlelit grandeur. Visit the Raleigh Tavern, and imagine the whispered conversations that helped shape a revolution. What makes Williamsburg so remarkable isn't just its scale, it's the authenticity. Craftspeople use period-accurate tools and techniques. Recipes are drawn from 18th-century cookbooks. Even the animals in the town's fields are heritage breeds that would have been familiar to colonial Virginians. Williamsburg doesn't just show you history. It makes you feel like you're living it. Town number 2, St. Augustine, Florida. If Williamsburg is the heart of colonial America, then St. Augustine, Florida is the nation's oldest heartbeat. Founded in 1565 by Spanish explorer Pedro Menéndez de Avilés, St. Augustine predates the Pilgrims' arrival at Plymouth Rock by a full 55 years. It is, by every definition, the oldest continuously occupied European established settlement in the contiguous United States. That's not a marketing slogan, it's a documented, verified historical fact. Walking through St. Augustine today is to walk through layers of history stacked like geological sediment. Spanish colonial architecture gives way to British-era buildings, then to the grand resort hotels constructed by oil tycoon Henry Flagler in the 1880s. Every block tells a different chapter of a story that spans nearly 5 centuries. The Castillo de San Marcos, a massive 17th-century stone fortress that sits at the edge of the Matanzas River, is perhaps the town's most dramatic monument to its past. Built by the Spanish using coquina, a locally quarried shellstone, the fort has withstood cannon fire, hurricanes, and the passage of time with remarkable grace. Step inside, and you can still feel the centuries pressed into its walls. St. Augustine's historic district is a labyrinth of narrow streets lined with boutique shops, art galleries, and restaurants housed in buildings that have stood for hundreds of years. Horse-drawn carriages clatter through the evenings, and ghost tours win through an old town that takes its haunted reputation very seriously. If any American city wears its history on its sleeve, it's St. Augustine, and it wears it beautifully. Town number 3, Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Tucked into the dramatic confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers, Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, is a town that history chose as a battleground literally and figuratively. Most Americans know Harper's Ferry for John Brown's 1859 raid on the Federal Armory, a violent, desperate attempt to spark a slave uprising that instead accelerated the nation towards civil war. But Harper's Ferry's story is far richer and older than that singular moment. George Washington himself selected this site for a national armory in the 1790s, and for decades it was one of the most important manufacturing centers in early America, producing rifles for the U.S. military and pioneering new techniques in interchangeable parts manufacturing, a revolution in industrial production. Today, much of the old town sits within Harper's Ferry National Historical Park, where the National Park Service has painstakingly preserved and restored dozens of 19th-century structures. Walk Lower Town and yowl past the engine house where John Brown made his last stand, a small brick building that has been moved, restored, and moved again over the centuries, yet still radiates the weight of that October night in 1859. The town itself seems frozen between eras, stone buildings clinging to the hillsides, river mist rolling in at dawn, the sound of water rushing below. It's moody, dramatic, and profoundly moving. Harper's Ferry is a place that demands reflection about freedom, about sacrifice, about the price America paid to become what it claims to be. Town number 4, Deadwood, South Dakota. Not all of America's historical preservation is about powdered wigs and candlelit parlors. Some of it smells like whiskey, gunpowder, and frontier legend, and nowhere is that truer than Deadwood, South Dakota. Born in the Black Hills Gold Rush of 1876, Deadwood exploded almost overnight from a mining camp into one of the wildest, most lawless boomtowns in American history. Within months of its founding, it had saloons, gambling dens, brothels, and a population of fortune seekers from across the globe, all crammed into a narrow gulch carved by the hills. Names that defined the Wild West mythology walked these very streets. Wild Bill Hickok, who was shot in the back of the head while playing poker at Nuttall and Mann's saloon, holding a hand of aces and eights ever after, known as the Dead Man's Hand. Calamity Jane, the hard-drinking, gun-toting frontierswoman who became one of the era's most colorful legends. And Seth Bullock, the lawman who brought a semblance of order to a town that desperately needed it. Today, Deadwood's entire historic Main Street is a National Historic Landmark, one of the few entire streets in America to hold that distinction. The old saloons still operate, the gambling halls still draw crowds, and every summer, gunfight reenactments play out on the streets just as they did in the 1870s. Deadwood doesn't sanitize its past. It celebrates it, controversies and all, and that honesty is part of what makes it so compelling. Town number 5, Savannah, Georgia. There are beautiful American cities, and then there is Savannah, Georgia, a place that operates by its own unhurried, magnolia-scented rhythm. Founded in 1733 by General James Oglethorpe, Savannah was laid out according to a visionary grid plan organized around 22 public squares, green, shaded gathering places flanked by townhouses, churches, and monuments. It's one of the most carefully planned urban landscapes in colonial American history, and remarkably, most of it is still intact. Walk through Savannah's 2.5-square-mile National Historic Landmark District and yowl past antebellum mansions dripping with Spanish moss, cobblestone streets worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and those glorious squares where locals still sit on benches and watch time pass at a gentler pace. Savannah's preservation record is extraordinary. When the rest of America was tearing down its 19th-century architecture in post-war urban renewal frenzies, Savannah's historic Savannah Foundation, founded in 1955 by a group of local women who famously bought a threatened building with money they didn't have, began the slow, passionate work of saving what remained. Today, Savannah boasts the largest urban historic district in the United States. But Savannah isn't just a museum city. It's alive with restaurants, art schools, jazz clubs, and a palpable creative energy that somehow coexists perfectly with its obsession with the past. It is, as one travel writer put it, a city that refuses to forget, but also refuses to stop living. Town number 6, Taos, New Mexico. Every town on our list preserves history, but Taos, New Mexico, preserves a history that stretches far beyond European colonization. Here, the past reaches back over 1,000 years, and it is very much alive. The Taos Pueblo, a multi-storied adobe complex that sits just north of the modern town, has been continuously inhabited for more than 1,000 years. It is one of the oldest continuously occupied settlements in all of North America, and today it remains home to approximately 150 Taos Pueblo people, who live there year-round without electricity or running water by choice, as an act of cultural preservation and spiritual commitment. The Pueblo is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a National Historic Landmark, and standing before its ancient, sun-baked walls against the backdrop of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, you feel the full weight of what that designation means. The town of Taos itself carries centuries of layered history: Spanish colonization, the Kit Carson-era American frontier, and the early 20th century art colony that drew Georgia O'Keeffe, Ansel Adams, and D.H. Lawrence to its high desert light. Adobe architecture dominates the streetscape, and strict building codes ensure it always will. Taos is a rare place where Indigenous history, Spanish colonial heritage, and American frontier mythology exist not in separate exhibits, but woven into the same streets, the same plazas, the same everyday rhythms. Town number 7. Natchez, Mississippi. Of all the American towns that live in the past, few do so with as much complexity or as much grandeur and shadow as Natchez, Mississippi. Sitting on a dramatic bluff above the Mississippi River, Natchez was, in the antebellum era, one of the wealthiest cities per capita in the entire United States. That wealth was built almost entirely on cotton and on the enslaved people who grew it, picked it, and made it profitable for white planters who lived in palatial Greek Revival mansions, while the people they enslaved lived and died in the fields below. Natchez has more antebellum mansions than any other city in America, over 300 pre-Civil War structures, still standing, many of them open for tours. The architecture is genuinely breathtaking. Stanton Hall, Longwood, Melrose, each one a masterpiece of 19th-century design, each one also a monument to one of the darkest chapters in American history. In recent years, Natchez has been working to tell a fuller story to acknowledge not just the elegance of the planter class but the humanity and suffering of the enslaved. The Forks of the Road historic site, once the largest domestic slave market in the Deep South, is now being developed as a major interpretive landmark. Natchez doesn't let you look away from history's beauty or its brutality, and that honesty, uncomfortable as it sometimes is, makes it one of America's most important historic destinations. Town number 8. Galena, Illinois. Tucked into the rolling hills of northwestern Illinois, Galena is a town that the 20th century seemed to simply pass over, and the result is one of the most perfectly preserved Victorian commercial districts in the entire United States. In the mid-1800s, Galena was one of the most important cities in the Midwest. Its strategic location on the Galena River, a tributary of the Mississippi, made it a major hub for lead mining and river commerce. At its peak, the town was wealthier than Chicago and home to 9 generals who served in the Civil War, most famously Ulysses S. Grant, who worked in his father's leather goods store here before the war made him a hero. Grant's pre-war home, a modest Italianate brick house on the east side of town, still stands as a state historic site, furnished exactly as it was when the Grant family lived there. And Main Street, a steep, curving commercial corridor of 19th-century storefronts, built into the hillside, looks so intact you'd be forgiven for expecting horse-drawn delivery wagons to appear around the corner. 90% of Galena's structures are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, an astonishing figure. The town's scale is small and walkable, its character genuine and unforced. It doesn't try too hard to be a tourist attraction because it doesn't need to. History just is there, on every corner. Town New MBR 9 Mystic, Connecticut. If the American story has a maritime chapter, and it absolutely does, then Mystic, Connecticut is one of its finest pages. In the 19th century, Mystic was one of the most important shipbuilding and whaling centers on the eastern seaboard. Dozens of sailing vessels were built here, ships that hunted whales across the world's oceans, carried cargo across the Atlantic, and helped build the commercial foundations of a young nation. Today, the Mystic Seaport Museum, founded in 1929 and spanning 37 acres along the Mystic River, is the largest maritime museum in the United States, and one of the most immersive living history experiences anywhere in the country. The museum has assembled an entire 19th-century seafaring village, with a working shipyard, period homes, a cooperage, a printing office, and most dramatically a fleet of historic vessels, including the Charles W. Morgan, the last surviving wooden whale ship in the world. Watching shipwrights repair the Morgan using traditional methods, or stepping below decks into the cramped, dark hold where whaling crews spent years at sea, is an experience that stays with you. The town of Mystic itself, particularly its charming downtown around the famous Bascule Drawbridge, has an old New England character that feels genuinely authentic. Seafood shacks, antique stores, and the sound of halyards slapping against masts in the harbor. Mystic is a place where the sea still smells like history. Town Number 10, Jerome, Arizona. Our final stop is perhaps the most dramatic, a town that clings to the side of Cleopatra Hill in the Black Mountains of central Arizona, 5,000 feet above sea level, with sweeping views of the Verde Valley and the Red Rock mesas beyond. Jerome, Arizona was once called the wickedest town in the West, and with a peak population of 15,000 miners, gamblers, and assorted frontier characters in the early 20th century, it earned that title. Copper mining made Jerome one of the richest towns in Arizona. The United Verde Mine, eventually owned by William Andrews Clark, one of the wealthiest men in America, produced over $1 billion worth of copper, silver, and gold over its lifetime. When the mines finally closed in 1953, Jerome didn't disappear, it simply stopped. The population fell to under 100, the buildings sat empty, and the town was declared a ghost town. But unlike most ghost towns, Jerome didn't crumble. Its buildings, saloons, Hotels, miners' boarding houses, the elegant Jerome Grand Hotel survived. And in the 1960s and 70s, artists and artisans discovered them. Today, Jerome has a population of about 450 people, one of the smallest incorporated towns in Arizona, and it has transformed into a thriving arts community that has embraced rather than erased its mining-era character. Galleries, studios, and restaurants occupy buildings that once served miners. The old jail has slid 225 feet downhill due to mining explosions loosening the earth, and it sits there still, a monument to Jerome's geological restlessness. Jerome is wild, strange, beautiful, and utterly unlike anywhere else in America. It's a ghost town that refused to die, and in its defiance, it found a new kind of life. 10 towns, 10 different stories, 10 different eras, and yet, something connects them all: a refusal to let the past be erased, a conviction that where we've been is as important as where we're going. In a country that often seems allergic to its own history, quick to tear down the old, pave over the inconvenient, and build something shiny in its place, these 10 towns stand as quiet, stubborn, magnificent acts of memory. They remind us that history isn't just something that happened. It's something that still lives, in the stones and streets and stories of places that chose to remember. So if you ever find yourself craving something real, something that cuts through the noise and connects you to the long, tangled, beautiful, complicated story of this country, consider making a detour. Lace up your walking shoes and step off the highway. The past is waiting for you. And it's closer than you think. If you enjoyed this journey through America's most historic towns, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of the places that make this country endlessly fascinating. Drop a comment below. We'd love to know. Which of these towns have you visited? Which is at the top of your list? And which historic town did we miss that deserves a spot on this list? Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep looking backward. Sometimes, that's exactly how you find your way forward.